There are places in this world where the fabric of reality is worn so thin that the past bleeds through like a festering wound. These are not merely old buildings with creaky floorboards or drafty corridors. They are reservoirs of human suffering, batteries charged by decades of despair, madness, and agonizing death. When you walk through their doors, you are not entering a museum of history. You are stepping into a living, breathing recording of hell. Welcome to Nocturnal Ledger. Tonight, we turn our gaze toward a brick behemoth sitting in the desolate quiet of Bethany, New York. It is a place that has worn many masks over the last 2 centuries. Some knew it as the Genesee County Poor Farm. Others called it the infirmary. Most knew it simply as the asylum. Today, it is known as Rolling Hills, and it is widely considered one of the most violently haunted locations in North America. But to understand the shadows that walk these halls, you must understand the true, documented horror of what happened here. This is not a campfire story. This is a forensic examination of a tragedy that claimed over 1,700 lives. The story begins in the biting cold of January, 1827. The local government of Genesee County recognized a problem. They had a surplus of what they termed unwanted people. In the early 19th century, society did not have safety nets. There was no welfare, no foster care, and no modern psychiatric treatment. If you were a widow with no money, you were a problem. If you were an orphan, you were a burden. If you were an alcoholic, a drifter, or someone suffering from schizophrenia, you were an eyesore. The solution was the poorhouse. On New Year's Day of 1827, the facility opened its doors. The premise was grimly simple. If you could not support yourself, you were sent to the poor farm. In exchange for a roof over your head and a meager bowl of gruel, you became the property of the county. You were expected to work the land, tend the livestock, and maintain the building until you either left, which was rare, or died, which was inevitable. What makes Rolling Hills so terrifying to paranormal investigators and historians alike is the indiscriminate mixture of its population. Imagine a dormitory where a terrifyingly violent criminal is sleeping 3 feet away from a crying 7-year-old orphan. Imagine a woman suffering from advanced dementia wandering the halls alongside a man with tuberculosis. There was no segregation based on ailment or age. The mad, the sick, the criminal, and the innocent were all thrown together into a pressure cooker of misery. The psychological imprint of this environment is what many parapsychologists believe fuels the haunting today. This is known as the stone tape theory, the idea that extreme emotional distress can be recorded onto the physical environment, specifically the minerals in the stone and brick foundation. At Rolling Hills, the distress was constant. The records show that the facility operated for over 140 years. In that time, the walls absorbed the cries of the forgotten, the coughs of the dying, and the screams of the insane. Let us delve into the specific, documented entities that are said to linger here. One cannot speak of Rolling Hills without mentioning the shadow people. In most haunted locations, a shadow figure is a fleeting glimpse, a trick of the peripheral vision. At Rolling Hills, they are solid. They are 3-dimensional, and they are aggressive. Witnesses, ranging from state troopers to seasoned paranormal researchers, have reported encountering a massive shadow entity in the area known as the East Wing. This is not a shapeless cloud. It is described as a 7-foot-tall silhouette, blacker than the darkness around it, that blocks out the light from the windows. It does not simply stand there. It paces. It leans around corners, and, most chillingly, it has been known to charge. There is a specific corridor on the 2nd floor, often referred to as the shadow hallway. The physics of this hallway seem to defy explanation. Visitors frequently report a sensation of walking through water, as if the air itself has thickened. This creates a physiological panic response. The heart races, the breath shortens, and the instinct to flee becomes overwhelming. Skeptics might argue this is due to infrasound, low-frequency sound waves caused by wind drafting through the decaying structure, which can cause hallucinations and dread. However, infrasound cannot explain the physical evidence left behind. Visitors to the shadow hallway often leave with unexplained scratches, These are not accidental scrapes against a wall. They are distinct, three-clawed welts that appear on the back or the neck, in places the victim cannot reach themselves. In demonology, a grouping of 3 scratches is often interpreted as a mockery of the Holy Trinity, a sign of a demonic or inhuman presence. Whether you believe in demons or simply in angry, confused spirits, the physical harm is documented in dozens of photographs and medical reports from those who dared to walk the East Wing alone. But not all the ghosts of Rolling Hills are faceless shadows. Some are heartbreakingly human. We must talk about Roy. Roy Krause is perhaps the most famous resident of Rolling Hills. He died in 1942 at the age of 52. Roy was a giant of a man, standing roughly 7.5 feet tall, likely suffering from gigantism. Because of his appearance and his gentle, simple nature, his family abandoned him at the asylum when he was just a child. He lived his entire life within those brick walls. He died there, and by all accounts, he never left. Roy's presence is one of the few that does not feel malevolent, though it is startling. Witnesses often report a foul smell manifesting in the room. Roy used to occupy the smell of stale tobacco and body odor. This is known as phantasmia, or olfactory hallucination, but it happens to people who have no prior knowledge of Roy's habits. Roy loved to smoke, and the heavy scent of a lit cigarette often permeates the air in a building where no smoking has been allowed for decades. Investigators attempting to communicate with Roy often capture electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs. These are digital recordings of voices that were not audible to the human ear at the time. When asked, "Is Roy here?" recorders have captured a deep, rumbling yes. On other occasions, a low, booming hum is heard, consistent with the vocal cords of a man of his immense size. Roy represents the tragedy of the poorhouse, a man who committed no crime, who hurt no one, but was imprisoned for life simply because he was different. His spirit seems anchored to the only home he ever knew, trapped in a perpetual cycle of loneliness. However, the sorrow of Roy stands in stark contrast to the terror of the psych ward. In the basement of the facility, the atmosphere changes drastically. The temperature drops between 10 and 15 degrees Fahrenheit instantly. This is the area that was used to house the lunatics, as they were labeled in the 1800s. The treatment for mental illness in the 19th century was indistinguishable from torture. Patients were chained to walls. They were subjected to ice water baths. They were locked in solitary confinement in windowless stone cells for days or weeks at a time. One specific room in the psych ward is known as the Christmas room, though the name is a cruel irony. It was here that a nurse, known only as Nurse Emmy, is said to have worked. Legend, supported by oral history from former employees, suggests that Emmy was not a benevolent caregiver. She was suspected of practicing the darker arts, perhaps witchcraft, and was rumored to abuse the patients under her care. Today, the Christmas room is a focal point for violent activity. Women, in particular, are targeted here. Female investigators have reported having their hair pulled violently. Others have felt cold hands gripping their throats. There is a recorded incident where a heavy metal door, which takes significant force to move, slammed shut and locked itself while a team was inside. When they finally pried it open, the corridor outside was empty. The auditory phenomena in the psych ward are equally disturbing. It is not uncommon to hear disembodied screaming. These are not the settling noises of an old house. These are guttural, human screams of agony that echo from the solitary confinement cells. During a paranormal investigation in 2010, a team captured a Class A EVP, a recording so clear it needed no enhancement. A voice, sounding breathless and terrified, whispered directly into the microphone, "Help me. It hurts." To understand why the energy here is so potent, we must look at the sheer scale of death. The Rolling Hills property includes a cemetery, but you would be hard-pressed to find it. It is not a manicured lawn with marble headstones. It is a field of bumps in the earth. Records indicate that over 1,700 people died while in the care of the Genesee County Poor Farm, Because they were destitute, they were not given proper burials. They were buried in plain pine boxes, often stacked on top of one another to save space. Their graves were marked only with small metal stakes bearing numbers, corresponding to a ledger kept inside the main office. Over time, nature reclaimed the land. The metal stakes rusted and disappeared. The woods grew over the cemetery. Today, there are hundreds of forgotten souls lying beneath the soil surrounding the asylum. Their names lost, their resting places disturbed by tree roots and erosion. This disrespect for the dead creates what paranormal researchers call a charged environment. In many cultures, the failure to perform proper burial rites is the primary cause of a haunting. The spirits are restless because they were discarded like trash. They have no identity, no memorial, and no peace. When you walk the grounds of Rolling Hills, you are literally walking on top of the forgotten dead. One of the most chilling aspects of the Rolling Hills haunting is the consistency of the reports over decades. In the 1970s, when the building was used as an antique shop and a storage facility, the owners reported the same phenomena that are reported today. They spoke of the sound of footsteps following them when they were alone. They spoke of doors that would not stay closed and lights that would not stay off. There is a famous account from a delivery driver in the 1980s. He arrived early in the morning to drop off a package. As he walked toward the main entrance, he saw a woman in a white nursing uniform staring at him from a second-story window. He waved, thinking it was an employee. She did not move. She did not blink. As he got closer, he realized that the window was painted shut from the inside and covered in cobwebs. When he looked up again, she was gone. He dropped the package on the steps and refused to ever return to the property. This apparition is believed to be the Halleck nurse, named after the Halleck wing of the hospital. Unlike the malevolent entity in the basement, this spirit seems to be continuing her rounds. Witnesses describe her as looking exhausted, her face etched with the stress of caring for hundreds of dying patients with no resources. We must also consider the scientific perspective. Could there be a rational explanation for the terror at Rolling Hills? Skeptics point to the presence of black mold and toxic spores in the decaying building. Exposure to certain molds can cause neurological symptoms, including hallucinations, anxiety, and a sense of doom. The isolation of the location, combined with the power of suggestion, can certainly play tricks on the mind. However, mold cannot explain the physical manipulation of objects. In the dining hall, a massive room where the inmates once ate their silent meals, heavy wooden tables have been seen sliding across the floor. Security cameras installed by the current caretakers have captured orbs of light moving with intelligent direction, stopping, turning, and reacting to people. One particularly compelling piece of evidence involves a flashlight experiment. This is a common technique where investigators set up a flashlight with a twist-on head, unscrewing it just enough so the connection is broken. They then ask spirits to touch the light to complete the circuit. At Rolling Hills, this technique yields results that defy probability. During one documented session, an investigator asked, "Is there anyone here who served in the Civil War?" The flashlight flickered on instantly. "Did you die in battle?" Silence. The light stayed off. "Did you die of sickness here?" The light blazed to life. "Are you angry?" The light began to strobe violently, flashing on and off in a rapid staccato rhythm that only stopped when the investigator apologized and stepped back. This level of intelligent interaction suggests that we are not dealing with residual hauntings, which are like recordings playing on a loop, but with intelligent hauntings. The entities are aware, they are listening, and they are reacting to the living. The horror of Rolling Hills is compounded by the specific tragedy of the orphans. The records show that hundreds of children passed through the poorhouse. Many were bound out for labor, essentially sold into indentured servitude to local farmers until they turned 21. But many others died of disease within the asylum. In the women's wing, visitors often bring toys, balls, dolls, and coloring books as trigger objects. It is one of the few places in the asylum where the atmosphere feels lighter, yet deeply sorrowful. There are accounts of balls rolling across the floor on their own as if pushed by invisible hands. People report the sensation of small, cold fingers slipping into their own, holding their hand for a brief moment before fading away. There is a recording, widely circulated in the paranormal community, taken in the children's ward. The ambient noise of the room is silent, but on the playback, you can clearly hear the sound of a music box winding up, followed by a child's voice singing a nursery rhyme. The song cuts off abruptly, replaced by the sound of a harsh, adult cough. It is a sonic snapshot of the reality these children lived in playtime, constantly interrupted by sickness and death. As we go deeper into the building, we reach the solitary confinement cells in the basement. This is the heart of darkness at Rolling Hills. The walls here are thick stone. No light penetrates. When the heavy wooden door is closed, the silence is absolute. It is sensory deprivation in its most brutal form. It is here that the crawler has been seen. The crawler is a shadow entity, distinct from the 7-foot man. This figure is described as spider-like, moving along the floor and walls with unnatural, jerking movements. It is low to the ground, scuttling in the periphery of your vision. Psychics who have visited the site describe the crawler not as a human spirit, but as an elemental accumulation of negativity. Think of it as a spiritual parasite. It feeds on the fear that was generated in these cells for a century. Every time a patient screamed in the dark, every time they lashed out in madness, they fed this entity. Now, when visitors come seeking a thrill, their fear feeds it further. It is a self-sustaining cycle of terror. There is a documented police report from the late 1990s involving a group of teenagers who broke into the asylum before it was opened for tours. They called 911, claiming they were being hunted. When the police arrived, they found the teenagers huddled in the main lobby, hysterical. One of the boys was catatonic. He had to be hospitalized. He claimed that while they were in the basement, something crawled up his leg and whispered his own name into his ear, followed by the date of his birth. The police found no one else in the building, but they did note that the dust on the basement floor was disturbed by drag marks that did not match human footprints. The sheer volume of evidence at Rolling Hills forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of death and suffering. If energy cannot be created or destroyed, as the laws of physics state, then what happens to the energy of 1,000 people dying in misery? It does not simply vanish. It saturates the environment. It seeps into the wood and the brick. It waits. The current caretakers of Rolling Hills operate the facility with a deep respect for the spirits, but they acknowledge the danger. There are rules. You do not provoke. You do not separate from the group in the basement. And you never, ever disrespect the dead. Those who break these rules often pay a price. There are stories of skeptics who taunted the spirits, challenging them to show themselves. One such man, a robust and healthy individual, collapsed in the hallway with a sudden, blinding migraine that felt like a physical blow to the head. He was carried out, vomiting and disoriented. Later, medical checks showed no aneurysm or stroke. He had simply been struck down by an unseen force. He described the sensation as an ice pick being driven into his skull the moment he mocked the entities. Even during the day, Rolling Hills is oppressive. The architecture itself is designed to intimidate. The windows are high and barred. The corridors are long and narrow, designed to maximize visibility for the guards and minimize privacy for the inmates. The paint is peeling in long, skin-like strips. The smell is a mixture of damp earth, rotting wood, and something metallic like old blood. It is important to remember that for the people who lived here, this wasn't a haunted house. It was their entire world. They woke up to the bell. They ate their gruel. They worked the farm until their hands bled. They sat in the day room, staring at the walls, waiting for the end. The haunting is merely the echo of that monotony, punctuated by moments of extreme pain. One of the most tragic figures documented in the infirmary records is a woman named Phoebe. Phoebe was blind and was brought to the poorhouse in the 1880s. Because she could not work, she was considered a drain on resources. She spent her days in a rocking chair in the corner of the women's ward. Witnesses today often report the sound of a rhythmic creaking coming from that same corner. Creak. Creak. It is the sound of a rocking chair on wooden floorboards. If you approach the sound, the temperature drops, and you may feel a soft brush against your face, like a cobweb or a veil. It is believed to be Phoebe, reaching out to touch the faces of the living, trying to see who has entered her room. It is a poignant reminder that not all ghosts are monsters. Some are just lonely souls trapped in the place where they were discarded. But then, the darkness returns. We must discuss the morgue. The morgue at Rolling Hills is a small, cold room equipped with an embalming table. It was here that the bodies were prepared for their nameless graves. The energy in the morgue is heavy and aggressive. Cameras frequently malfunction in this room. Batteries that were fully charged drain to zero in seconds. This is a common phenomenon in paranormal investigation, believed to be the spirits drawing energy from the devices to manifest. In the morgue, a specific phenomenon has been observed: the moving of the embalming table. It is a heavy, industrial piece of equipment, yet caretakers have arrived in the morning to find it shifted several inches or rotated to face a different direction. The floor shows the scrape marks of the movement. Who or what is moving the table, and why? Some theorists suggest that the spirits are reenacting their final moments. The trauma of death, the cold handling of their bodies, the lack of ceremony, it all culminates in this room. The table is the focal point of their transition from unwanted inmate to forgotten corpse. As we near the end of this examination, we must look at the legacy of the Genesee County Poor Farm. It closed its doors as a residential facility in 1974. For nearly 50 years, the building has stood as a monument to a time when poverty was treated as a crime. The spirits that inhabit it are the whistleblowers of history. They refuse to be silenced. They bang on the walls, they scream in the dark, and they scratch the living to ensure that we know they were there. When you listen to the recordings from Rolling Hills, when you see the photos of the shadow figures, you are witnessing the nocturnal ledger of the past being balanced. The living ignored these people. We looked away. Now, in death, they demand our attention. So, if you ever find yourself driving through the quiet countryside of Bethany, New York, and you see the looming brick silhouette of Rolling Hills against the moonlight, keep driving. Do not stop. Do not let your curiosity get the better of you, because inside those walls, the year is still 1827. The cold is still biting. The hunger is still gnawing. And the shadows in the hallway are waiting for someone new to join the darkness. The reality of Rolling Hills is not just that it is haunted. It is that it never truly closed. The residents are still there. Roy is still smoking his phantom cigarettes. The nurse is still making her rounds. The children are still playing in the dust. And the crawler is still waiting in the basement. This has been a file from the Nocturnal Ledger. We document the darkness so you don't have to experience it. But remember, just because you turn off the screen doesn't mean they aren't watching. Sleep well.